Imagine a biological shortcut so profound that it compresses a million years of natural human evolution into a single, dedicated life. It sounds like something out of a science fiction novel, but this is the provocative core of Kriya Yoga. Today, we are exploring the biofrequency of bliss, a state where the human nervous system is no longer just a passive receiver of sensory data, but a finely tuned instrument for cosmic awareness. The premise here is radical. The mind has the inherent power to transcend all physical limitations. Through the specific super method of Kriya, specifically the precise practice of 14 Kriyas, 2 Mahamudras, and 2 Yodi Mudras, the practitioner gains the equivalent of 12 years of physical, mental, and spiritual evolution in just a few minutes. Think about that for a moment. We are talking about overcoming the very limitation of time that governs natural selection. By increasing the receptive power of the spine and the brain, a yogi stops looking for answers in the external world and begins to know, see, and feel everything from within. This isn't just about relaxation, it is a systematic rewiring of your internal circuitry. We are shifting consciousness away from the external senses, which keep us tethered to the body, and transferring that energy directly into the spine and brain. This transfer is the bridge to superconsciousness and eventually cosmic consciousness. When we talk about the biofrequency of bliss, we are talking about an initiation where consciousness moves from the body to the spirit. The result is a natural, effortless development of intuition that can fuel inspired work in science, literature, and art. In this state, you are feeling the literal inspiration of the infinite in your spine, realizing a union with God that usually takes countless incarnations to achieve. Let's break down the specific mathematical formula presented here, because it's absolutely staggering. The text prescribes a very precise sequence: 14 Kriyas, 2 Mahamudras, and 2 Yodi Mudras. On the surface, it sounds like a simple daily ritual, but the claim behind it is nothing short of revolutionary. We are talking about evolutionary compounding. The idea is that this specific combination, performed in just a few minutes, equates to 12 full years of natural evolution for the body, mind, and soul. To put that in perspective, nature usually operates on a glacial timescale. Evolution takes millions of years and hundreds of incarnations to refine the human instrument toward higher realization. Kriya Yoga is presented as the super method that shatters this time limitation. By engaging in this practice, you are essentially overclocking your nervous system. The receptive power of your spine and brain is increased exponentially. You stop being a passive observer of the world and become someone who knows, sees, and feels everything from a centered internal source. The core mechanics involve a radical transfer of energy. Normally, our consciousness is leaked out through our senses. We are habitually identified with what we touch, hear, and see. This formula pulls that consciousness back, anchoring it into the spine and brain. This is where the rewiring happens. By moving energy from the periphery to the core, you transition from sensory-bound awareness into superconsciousness. The result isn't just spiritual, it's practical. It mentions that after this practice, one can perform inspired work in art or science because intuition begins to flow without effort. You are no longer waiting for a million years of natural progress. You are seizing a million years of growth in a single lifetime, finding union with the infinite through the literal biofrequency of your own spine. To truly understand how Kriya Yoga achieves such radical biological acceleration, we have to look at the supporting architecture, Mahamudra and Yodi Mudra. If the Kriya breath is the high-voltage current, these 2 mudras are the essential specialized circuitry that prevents your biomachinery from blowing a fuse. Let's talk about Mahamudra first. Practiced just twice, this great gesture serves as a physical and energetic equalizer. It isn't just a stretch, it is a deliberate alignment of the spine that balances the body's internal currents. By integrating the breath with specific physical locks, it prepares the nervous system to handle the increased energetic load generated during Kriya. It ensures that the quickened evolution, that massive leap in consciousness, doesn't overwhelm the system, but rather grounds it in a state of physical readiness. Then we have Yodi Mudra, the inner light gesture. While Mahamudra balances, Yodi Mudra seals. It focuses on withdrawing the consciousness from the 5 senses and redirecting it inward toward the spine and the brain's higher centers. This is critical because realization only comes when we stop leaking energy through our sensory perceptions. By practicing Yoti Mudra twice, you are essentially insulating your internal wires, allowing the receptive power of the brain to increase exponentially. Together, these mudras transform the body into a stable vessel capable of holding superconsciousness. They bridge the gap between physical effort and spiritual realization. Without this stabilization, the attempt to compress 1,000,000 years of evolution into a single lifetime would be like trying to run a supercomputer on a battery designed for a flashlight. These techniques ensure that when you feel the inspiration of the infinite in your spine, your nervous system is ready to translate that frequency into pure intuitive wisdom. Think about the average human experience for a moment. Most of the time, our awareness is completely fragmented, leaking out through the five senses like water through a sieve. We are perpetually out there, reacting to sounds, sights, and external pressures. This creates a state of bioenergetic depletion, where our energy is constantly scattered and exhausted. Here is the central physiological pivot of Kriya Yoga, the deliberate withdrawal of this outward-facing energy. Imagine your nervous system not as a series of outward-reaching wires, but as a powerful vacuum. Through the specific sequence of 14 Kriyas, 2 Maha Mudras, and 2 Yoti Mudras, you aren't just relaxing, you are fundamentally reversing the polarity of your life force. You are drawing consciousness away from the peripheral senses and pulling it deep into the central pillar of your being, the spine and the brain. This isn't just a metaphor. When you transfer consciousness to the spine, you are essentially turning your central nervous system into a highly receptive antenna for cosmic information. The spine becomes magnetized, vibrating at a frequency that transcends ordinary physical sensation. In this state, the time-bound limitations of biological evolution are effectively bypassed. What normally takes 1,000,000 years of natural growth and numerous incarnations can be compressed into a single lifetime. By increasing the receptive power of your internal hardware, you bypass the slow external path of learning. The yogi begins to know, see, and feel everything from within. This is the shift from sense identification to superconsciousness. After this internal reset, the brain enters a state of high-order integration where intuition develops without effort. Whether it's art, science, or literature, you are now working from a place of divine inspiration, the very presence of the infinite spirit pulsing through your spine. Think about the sheer scale of 1,000,000 years. That is the time frame natural evolution traditionally requires to refine the human soul through countless incarnations and physical births. But what if time isn't a fixed barrier, but a variable we can actually manipulate? This is where Kriya Yoga presents itself as a radical temporal shortcut. By performing a specific sequence, 14 Kriyas, 2 Mahamudras, and 2 Jyoti Mudras, we are told that 12 years of spiritual and physical evolution can be gained in just a few minutes. It sounds like science fiction, but it rests on the potent axiom that the mind can do everything. When we talk about overcoming time limitations, we're really talking about a shift in biofrequency. Most of our waking lives are spent with our consciousness leaking out through the senses, tethered to the slow, linear progression of the material world. Kriya reverses this energy flow. It pulls that vital consciousness back into the central axis of the spine and the brain. By drastically increasing the receptive power of these neural pathways, the yogi begins to know, see, and feel all from within, rather than waiting for the slow feedback loop of the external world. This is the super method. If you think of spiritual growth like a massive data transfer, Kriya is the upgrade from a lagging dial-up connection to high-speed fiber optics. You aren't changing the destination, you're changing the bandwidth of your soul. By stepping outside the slow-motion grind of natural evolution, you bypass the need for millions of years of trial and error. You aren't waiting for some distant future to achieve realization. You are recalibrating your nervous system to the frequency of the infinite right now. In this state, time dissolves because you've transferred your identity from the decaying body to the eternal spirit. We often think of our spine as just a structural support, a stack of bones holding us upright. But in yoga, the spine is the ultimate antenna. When we talk about increasing the receptive power of the spine and brain, we are discussing a literal rewiring of how you process reality. Think about how much of your life is spent seeking external data, checking the news, looking for social approval, or relying on 5 limited senses to tell you what is true. Kriya flips the script. By practicing Kriya 14 times alongside Mahamudra and Yati Mudra, you are essentially supercharging the nervous system. The text tells us that this practice allows a yogi to know, see, and feel all from within. This isn't just a poetic metaphor, it is a shift in the biofrequency of your consciousness. Instead of consciousness leaking out through the eyes and ears into the chaotic world, it is drawn back into the central highway of the spine. Imagine a scientist struggling with a complex equation for years. Through this internal receptivity, the answer doesn't come from a textbook. It flashes into the mind as a direct realization. This is why the text mentions that inspired work in art and science follows the practice. You are no longer guessing. You are perceiving the blueprint of the universe directly through your own physiology. This is how you gain 12 years of evolution in just a few minutes. You are bypassing the slow, agonizing process of trial and error that characterizes natural evolution. By transferring consciousness from the senses to the you become a direct conduit for universal truth. You stop needing the world to tell you what is true, because the infinite spirit is vibrating right there, in the marrow of your own spine. In the framework of Kriya Yoga, terms like superconsciousness and cosmic consciousness aren't just high-flying religious ideals. They represent precise, measurable recalibrations of how a human being processes reality. Normally, our awareness is body-bound. We perceive the world through the narrow, survival-oriented filter of the 5 senses, which creates a localized ego, the persistent feeling that I am only this specific physical container, fundamentally separate from the rest of the universe. However, the Kriya technique suggests a radical internal transfer. By drawing energy and attention away from the peripheral senses and concentrating it into the spine and brain, we effectively unplug from the standard egocentric broadcast. This is the gateway to superconsciousness. In this state, the receptive power of the brain is heightened so significantly that intuition becomes a primary faculty rather than a lucky guess. You aren't just analyzing data, you are knowing, seeing, and feeling truth from within the biostructure of your own nervous system. When this state deepens into cosmic consciousness, the sense of being a solitary, isolated observer dissolves completely. You begin to experience yourself as an integral in a vast, intelligent cosmic fabric. It is the shift from being a single drop of water to realizing you are the entire ocean. The text emphasizes that this isn't just a philosophy, it's a biofrequency shift. By increasing the voltage the spine can carry, the practitioner bypasses the standard time limitations of evolution. Years to achieve through slow, iterative biological changes, Kriya catalyzes in a single lifetime. You are essentially rewiring your neural architecture to sustain a union with the infinite spirit, perceiving the inspiration of the cosmic whole right within your own marrow. Initiation is a word that often carries a sense of mystery or secrecy, but in the context of Kriya Yoga, it represents a very practical and deliberate transfer of identity. Think of it as a psychological pivot point. Most of us spend our entire lives in a state of body identification. We believe we are the eyes that see, the skin that feels, and the muscles that move. But Kriya is an invitation to cross a significant hurdle, moving from body identification to spirit identification. This transition happens along what yogis call the literal highway of the soul. In our daily lives, our consciousness is scattered outward through the senses, reacting to the external world. Kriya reverses this flow. By practicing Kriya 14 times, coupled with Mahamudra and Yoti Mudra, you are essentially drawing that energy back from the periphery and funneling it directly into the spinal column and the brain. Why is the spine so central? Because it is the receptive power center of our being. When consciousness is transferred here, the nervous system is rewired to handle a higher biofrequency. This is the super method that bypasses the million-year slog of natural evolution. Instead of waiting through countless incarnations for the body and mind to refine themselves, you are using the mind's own power to accelerate the process in a single lifetime. It is a biological shortcut to cosmic consciousness. By feeling the inspiration of the infinite spirit within the spine, you shift from being a passenger in a physical vessel to being the driver of a spiritual engine. It isn't just philosophy, it's an internal technology that allows you to know and feel everything from within, transforming work into art and thought into pure intuition. Now, let's dive into the most underrated part of this entire practice, the period of rest. The text is incredibly specific. After performing your 14 Kriyas, 2 Maha Mudras, and 2 Yodi Mudras, you must enter a state of stillness. This isn't just a break, it's a critical biological integration phase. Think of your nervous system as a high-performance circuit. Through these specific repetitions, you've essentially increased the receptive power of your spine and brain, flooding the body with a high-frequency biocharge. If you jump straight back into the noise of the world, you lose the opportunity to ground that energy. This afterglow is when the rewiring actually takes root. The text emphasizes that following this rest, you become capable of truly inspired work in literature, art, or science. Why? Because your consciousness has been successfully transferred from the distracting external senses to the central highway of the spine. In this state, intuition isn't something you struggle to find. It develops of itself. You are shifting from the slow, incremental process of natural evolution, which usually takes millions of years, to a manual, accelerated evolution that happens in a single lifetime. During this profound stillness, you are meant to feel the inspiration of God in the spine. This is the moment of contact with the frequency of Christ and the great prophets. It is the literal transfer of consciousness from body to spirit. By resting and allowing the nervous system to absorb this cosmic consciousness, you aren't just gaining spiritual peace, you are gaining the mental clarity to excel in the physical world. You are training your brain to see and feel from within, turning deep meditation into tangible worldly brilliance. We often think of deep spiritual practices as the exclusive domain of the mountain-dwelling ascetic, but Kriya Yoga is actually a high-performance tool for the modern intellectual, the artist, and the scientist. Think about the mental static that blocks a physicist from a breakthrough or a novelist from their next great chapter. That static is essentially sensory noise, our consciousness being scattered and leaked through the 5 senses. Kriya Yoga acts as a radical biological rewiring of the system. By performing the specific sequence of 14 Kriyas, 2 Maha Mudras, and 2 Yodi Mudras, you are essentially compressing 12 years of natural, physical evolution into a matter of minutes. This isn't just a spiritual metaphor, it's a deliberate physiological shift. You are consciously transferring your vital energy and awareness away from external stimuli and grounding it directly in the axis of the spine and the brain. When the consciousness resides in the central nervous system rather than the periphery, your receptive power is amplified exponentially. This is the secret behind inspired work. Once you rest after the practice, the mind is no longer distracted by the body. It is free to engage in literature, art, or science with a clarity that feels supernatural. In this state, intuition develops of itself. It becomes effortless because the mental noise that blocks genius has been cleared. You are effectively bypassing the slow, million-year grind of natural incarnations to tap into a direct line of cosmic consciousness. By centering the mind in the spine, you become a vessel for the infinite. Whether you are solving complex equations or painting a masterpiece, you are no longer struggling. You are operating from a biofrequency of bliss, feeling the very inspiration of God in your spine. We often think of intuition as a lucky guess or a vague gut feeling, but in the science of Kriya, intuition isn't a gamble. It is a precise biological inevitability. When you perform the sequence of 14 Kriyas, 2 Maha Mudras, and 2 Yodi Mudras, you aren't simple breath work. You are actively relocating your seat of awareness. Normally, our consciousness is constantly leaking outward through the 5 senses. We are perpetually reacting to what we touch, see, and hear, which keeps the mind tethered to the external world and its limitations. Kriya reverses this energy flow. By drawing that life force back into the central nervous system, specifically the spine and the brain, you essentially magnetize these centers. The text is very clear. The receptive power of the spine is physically and spiritually increased through this magnetism. We must distinguish this from a standard gut feeling. A gut feeling is usually just the subconscious brain processing past sensory data. High-level intuition, however, is an inner sight that takes over when the senses are no longer the primary source of information. It develops of itself without effort because the static of the sensory world has been bypassed. This is how a yogi achieves in one lifetime what natural evolution would take 1,000,000 years to accomplish. By gaining 12 years of evolution in just a few minutes of practice, the brain becomes a more refined, supersensitive instrument. This leads directly to inspired work, whether in science, art, or literature. You aren't grinding through logic. You are tapping into a frequency where you know, see, and feel all from within. It is the transition from sense identification to cosmic consciousness, contacting the vibration of the prophets and finding a direct, felt union with the infinite spirit in the spine. We often fall into the trap of thinking that if we just read enough scriptures or master enough theological logic, we'll eventually arrive at the truth. But here's the stark reality. Realization can come only by the development of one's intuition. Intellectual study is essentially a two-dimensional map of a multidimensional territory. Logic is built on dualism, the observer analyzing the observed, the subject dissecting the object. But ultimate truth isn't something you look at, it's something you become. When we talk about the biofrequency of bliss, we're describing a precise neurobiological state where the nervous system stops broadcasting the chaotic static of sensory desire and starts resonating with the frequency of pure, unadulterated intuition. In the Kriya tradition, this is achieved by the literal transfer of consciousness from the peripheral senses to the central axis, the spine and brain. Think of it like a radio receiver. You can study the physics of electromagnetic waves for a lifetime, but you won't hear the symphony until you actually tune the dial to the correct frequency. Intuition in this context isn't just a vague hunch, it is direct perception. It's the singular moment where the seeker and the sought become one. In this high-frequency state, you don't need a logical bridge to reach cosmic consciousness because the distance between you and the divine has dissolved. You know, see, and feel everything from within. This is why inspired work in science or literature flows so effortlessly after the practice of Kriya. You've bypassed the clunky, linear processor of the egoic mind and plugged directly into the universal source code. By rewiring the spine to sustain this increased receptive power, you move beyond the 1,000,000 years of natural evolution. You are no longer just thinking about the infinite. You are vibrating as the infinite spirit itself. Realization is the end of deduction and the beginning of absolute being. One of the most fascinating aspects of Kriya Yoga is its deeply ecumenical heart. When the text speaks about contacting Christ and the prophets of the world, it isn't calling for a conversion to a specific creed or a shift in religious identity. Instead, it's inviting us into what is often described as Christ consciousness. Think of this not just as a historical person, but as a state of being, a universal frequency of intelligence that these figures embodied and radiated throughout history. Kriya Yoga acts as a physiological bridge to this state. By systematically withdrawing energy from the external senses and centering it in the spine and the brain, the practitioner essentially tunes their nervous system to a higher bandwidth. It's about moving from the narrow, localized awareness of the body into the expansive, non-local field of the infinite spirit. When you feel the inspiration of God in the spine during practice, you aren't just imagining a feeling, you are activating the receptive power of your cerebral spinal centers. This is why Kriya is described as a super method. It bypasses the slow, natural evolution of the mind by creating a direct connection to the source of wisdom. Whether you look toward the prophets of the East or the West, the goal remains the same, a direct, experiential union. By rewiring the nervous system to handle this higher biofrequency, the yogi begins to see and feel all from within. Realization can only come by the development of your intuition. It's a scientific approach to mysticism. You aren't just reading about realization, you are cultivating the tools to perceive it. In this space, the distinctions between different faiths dissolve into the shared reality of one cosmic consciousness. Through the spine, we reach the same infinite spirit that has guided every enlightened master throughout human history. When we talk about feeling the inspiration of God in the spine, we aren't speaking in metaphors. We are describing a literal physiological event. Imagine your spinal column as a dormant high-voltage cable. Through the correct practice of Kriya, specifically 14 rounds, alongside Mahamudra and Yoti Mudra, you are flipping the switch on your body's latent bioelectrical system. What does that feel like? It often begins as a localized warmth at the base of the spine, a subtle thermal glow. But as consciousness is withdrawn from the senses and funneled into the central nervous system, that warmth transforms. It becomes a distinct upward current. Practitioners describe it as a bioelectric presence, a fine, shimmering tingle that feels more real than the physical world. It's as if your nerves have been upgraded from copper wire to fiber optics. This is the physical-spiritual intersection. You are increasing the receptive power of your brain and spine. In this state, the time limitations of natural evolution are bypassed. You are compressing 12 years of soul growth into a few minutes because you are no longer relying on the slow external stimuli of the senses. Instead, you are tapping into the direct frequency of the infinite spirit. As this internal current rises, the mind reaches a state of superconsciousness. This isn't just a mood, it's a rewiring. After the practice, that inspired energy flows into your creative work because your intuition is now functioning at a higher voltage. You are literally feeling the inspiration of God as a tangible vibration within your marrow, contacting the presence of Christ and the prophets through a shared biofrequency of bliss. This is the super method, where evolution is quickened and one lifetime becomes enough to realize the infinite. We have spent time dissecting the individual components of this practice, but to truly understand the biofrequency of bliss, we must look at how these elements synthesize into a singular, transformative technology. The formula is remarkably precise. The correct practice of Kriya 14 times, coupled with Mahamudra twice and Yoti Mudra twice. This is not just a set of physical exercises. It is a specific biospiritual sequence designed to act as an evolutionary accelerator. By following this exact protocol, a practitioner can gain 12 years of physical, mental, and spiritual evolution in just a few minutes of focused work. Think about the sheer scale of that promise. What typically takes 1,000,000 years and countless incarnations of slow, natural evolution is condensed into the span of a single human lifetime. Kriya is the super method because it systematically overcomes the time limitations of the material world. It fundamentally increases the receptive power of your spine and brain. Instead of processing the world through the fractured, externalized lenses of the five senses, you are transferring that consciousness directly into the central nervous system. This internal migration, moving from the periphery of the body to the core of the spirit, is the initiation into cosmic consciousness. When you reside in the spine, intuition is no longer something you strive for. It develops of itself without effort. You begin to see, feel, and know all things from within. Whether it involves breakthroughs in science, art, or literature, your work becomes truly inspired because you are operating from the seat of universal intelligence. Ultimately, by feeling the inspiration of the infinite in the spine, you are rewiring your nervous system to maintain a permanent union with the spirit. In an era defined by sensory overload and relentless distraction, the legacy of Kriya Yoga stands as a profound super method for reclaiming the self. We often feel trapped by the slow pace of personal growth, but the science behind this practice suggests a radical shortcut to human evolution. By performing the correct sequence, 14 Kriyas, 2 Mahamudras, and 2 Yoti Mudras, a practitioner gains the equivalent of 12 years of evolution for the body, mind, and soul in just a few minutes of focused effort. Think about that. The wisdom and realization that usually require 1,000,000 years and countless incarnations of natural evolution are suddenly made possible within a single lifetime. The mechanics of this shift are centered entirely in your nervous system. Kriya functions as a biofrequency tuning fork, transferring your consciousness away from the external, exhausting demands of the senses and drawing it deep into the spine and brain. This isn't just a spiritual metaphor, it is a deliberate rewiring of your receptive power. When you rest after practice, the spine and brain become highly sensitized, allowing intuition to develop effortlessly and without strain. Whether you are engaged in literature, art, or science, your work becomes truly inspired because you are no longer operating from sensory reaction, but from a state of superconsciousness. Ultimately, Kriya Yoga is an initiation into cosmic consciousness. It teaches us that the mind can do everything once it is no longer tethered to the body's perceived limitations. As you practice, feel the inspiration of the infinite spirit vibrating within your very vertebrae. Through this inner contact, we find our union with the divine. Today, the path to permanent bliss isn't found in the chaotic world outside, but in the internal architecture of your own spine. You possess the potential right now to rewire your nervous system and claim your union with the infinite spirit.